The moment the energy of deception and misfortune condenses to the limit, an underground maze suddenly forms regardless of location, which is a dungeon. The energy of the dead fuels its power and creates sweet bait to lure in more food. There are always many monsters around it because an artifact is planted at the dungeon's heart. The older and more dangerous a dungeon is, the more powerful and valuable the artifacts are. This might be why, in recent years, rather than taking care of their citizens, many kingdoms have been focusing on managing dungeons and finding artifacts. These dungeons entice the hearts of people. A few soldiers were in the jungle. One saw a flower and was trying to touch it when his fellow stopped. Explorer Stetch Atelier instructed him to be careful because he would be stung and poisoned if he touched that plant. He apologized and backed out. He requested them not to do anything of their own accord, especially when they were near the dungeon. Gerald called the explorer and requested him to look there as they found a dungeon, which surprised them. The explorer informed them that this was one of the oldest dungeons in their kingdom. The other soldier instructed his companion Balstock to unpack the luggage and ready the soldiers as they would enter as soon as their basic adjustments were prepared. He was surprised as he comprehended that he meant right now, though it took a whole week to get there. He assumed that a 2-week round trip would be enough time for the two brothers to play tricks, so they wouldn't have the time to waste. Stetch Atelier wondered how great a person he was for having this many soldiers accompanying him, and he also hired a class explorer like him. He had no reason to reject the offer if he would get his share. The dungeon before them was as dangerous as that's level A, and he couldn't even imagine what could be inside. However, with this amount of power, it should be possible. Rather than likely, it should be more than likely. The prince summoned the explorer to look there and to move further, and he affirmed. He closed his eyes and activated his skill pathfinding level 7, finding the shortest route to their target destination. Finding and safely getting through the fastest route is the quality of a class explorer. He activated animal instincts, a level 6 skill, maximized the senses in the toes and fingertips, and enhanced hearing to the ability of echolocation. This was the ability beyond the human senses, sonar detection and vibration, similar to wizard clairvoyance. These exploration skills made him a livelihood since others couldn't see this. The soldier was worried that the explorer didn't seem like he had much, so he wondered if they should trust and follow him. Another soldier was sure Sir Gerald didn't hire him without any reason. He might have some specialties, so he wanted to trust the explorer. He led them all and instructed them to go through that location, but they decided to go there first. 7. He instructed them to watch where they were going when they came over and be careful of the ceiling. They wondered what was wrong with the ceiling, and when they looked above, they were surprised as it was full of sharp and pointed rocks, wondering how he knew about this. Every time the explorer stepped, he could hear the creak of a spring over the wall, and thought that the traps from the early days of the dungeon generation would be old now. The floor and the trigger might be connected, so he requested them to stick slightly to the wall and move. The soldiers were further shocked as it didn't make sense for him to hear all that as they could not hear any clicking sound. While passing by the wall, he touched a break that alarmed him, so he opened it and cut the thread with his dagger. At the edge of the wall, he saw a rod attached to it and damaged it with the rock. He knew now it would get a little bit complicated. In the largest area of the dungeon, there is always a dungeon keeper who protects the artifact, which is the heart of the dungeon. As an explorer, not a wizard or warrior, he knew it was the last wall he couldn't break through. He was startled as suddenly the soldier appeared from that wall, inquiring about the place. He shouted to advance to the front of the force until they could get to their target and ordered them for a forward defense formation. He asked the main lead how they called out the dungeon keeper, but it was pretty simple, as they had to give it a sign. He threw the stone, and a forceful wind blew out the door, pushing them behind. A monster named Tarrasque appeared out of there. They were shocked to see it and terrified as it roared, but their head instructed them not to be afraid and that the front row should move forward. Tarrasque blew fire from its mouth while the soldiers were blocking it with their shields, and their heads instructed them not to let it break through and deploy the shield wall. All of them activated their skill-shied wall level 6, which is formed with 2 or more people and grants resistance against physical and magic barriers. He instructed the archer of the rear row to aim for the monster's mouth, and they prepared to attack it. But before they could shoot it, they informed their head, Balstock, that the flames were too intense because of the view and wind pressure. It was challenging to aim accurately. It was much stronger than he thought, and he couldn't see anything because they could only aim at its mouth using their senses. He called the explorer and asked if he could use his skills to aim at its mouth. Stetch was shocked as he had never used that before. But he again asked him if he could aim, which puzzled the explorer as he wasn't expecting this kind of situation. But he was a class explorer, so he wanted to try it. So he took the archfirer and aimed at the monster's mouth. He wondered if the center would be enough, but he had to attack before the fire spread even more. He used his animal instinct and shot its mouth and was surprised as he did it. Tarask's mouth was injured, so it stopped blowing fire, and Ballstock instructed the soldier not to lose their focus because it was just getting started now. The protagonist was shocked as the monster started attacking them vigorously, and he started rushing away, thinking that the fire wasn't a problem. That was wild how strong it was. This all didn't make sense to him, and he requested them to do something. They all attacked it, but none of their attacks got through because of its armor, and it struck them with its claws. Ballstock instructed them to use the shield bash and knock him down as it's the shield, and its back is so solid that it could get up quickly. The monster attacked the protagonist, but they used the shield bash level 5 skill before it could work. This skill strengthens the shield and swings it to blow the enemy away, and there is a possible chance of confusion from the physical damage. Ballstock attacked its mouth, and it roared. He knew he needed one more blow to make it fall. They used the shield bash again, and it fell on the ground. This was the time for Gerald to attack the monster, and he shot and beheaded it. The protagonist was amazed as he hit it, and everyone was happy as they won and killed it. They finally got the dungeon keeper, which amazed him as he would finally be able to see the artifacts. They head inside, and on their way, Ballstock inquires since he told them his name is Stetch, which he affirmed. From what they heard, he could never create a single dungeon, even though he was a class explorer, and they asked him for confirmation if it was true. The protagonist was speechless. Gerald said he had no trouble against the traps, so if he failed to get to the heart, he assumed it might be because of the dungeon keeper. If that's true, he assumed it might be the first artifact he had seen, and he affirmed that it was true. All of them were amazed to see the artifact. Gerald suggested touching it since it was his first time. He wondered if he didn't think he would grab it and run away. Gerald also thought that, but in return, he would have to pay with his neck if he got caught. He remembered the contract according to which everything except for the artifact in the dungeon would be his, so even without it, he would have a good profit, and it wouldn't hurt to take a look. He moved his hand toward it, and as he grabbed it, he shouted in pain, and his skin started to tear apart, which shocked everyone. He fell on the ground and was mourning with excruciating pain, and Gerald apologized to him for this. These artifacts, the source of negative energy, would easily fall into a human hand. He assured him that they wouldn't forget his help and cut his hand with his sword that his fist opened, and he instructed Ballstock to look at it. He looked at the ring and informed him that the curse seemed to have been lifted, which made him happy. Gerald ordered them to be prepared to leave, but as he lifted the ring, they saw the veins coming out of it, and it joined the protagonist's hand with his body. High risk was detected, so it activated the skill and automatically recovered him, and his body started generating and transforming. They got alarmed and attacked him, but it passed through its body, so Ballstock commanded the archers to fire, but these efforts were not working. He wondered if it could be a symbolic type and cursed the protagonist. Soon, the ground was torn apart. They were shocked as the reaction that took the artifact was already so unbelievable. Ballstock was stunned because this rate of collapse wasn't a good sign, as their soldiers were also falling, and he requested Gerald to run away. Before leaving, he looked at him and was furious as he put in so much effort to come there and get it, but he never thought he couldn't get it this time because of him. He still wanted to take the artifact, but Ballstock grabbed his hand and rushed away, cursing the explorer. After leaving, the protagonist transforms into his human form and is notified that the artifact Memento Mortem has recognized him as a partner. He falls into the water, which takes him to an edge while he is holding the ring. He becomes conscious and coughs out a lot of the water, wondering where he is. It is so dark, and his body feels like it is ripping apart. He opened his eyes, saw the ring in his hand, and wondered why he had this ring in his hand. He remembered that he should have died after getting tricked by Gerald and touching the ring. He can't figure out how he should go back, and then the skeleton appears from the ring and tells him that he indeed died, and that he was his incompetent partner. Outside the dungeon, Gerald was stunned as they were the only ones who survived and cursed him. Balstock tries to calm him down, but he gets furious at him as he thinks he would calm down and inquires why he used the scroll. He explained that it wasn't a situation where everyone could get out together safely. He furiously hit him and was worried because his brother already knew that he led the soldier, which was why he didn't want to lose any of these soldiers. He remembered the reaction after Stetch touched the ring and inquired what it was as he saw how the corpse came back to life. No ordinary artifact, not even the parasitic type, could move abnormally like that with its owner dead. It was Balstock's first time seeing an artifact like that, but they speculated that it could be an independent artifact if it were not a parasitic type. It's neither of them. It's an understandable symbiotic type, but Balstock had never heard about it before. Gerald uttered that existing artifacts are usually classified into two types. The most common is the independent type. This type has the most significant number of existing artifacts, and the users use them well, so they are easily used as tools. On the other hand, the parasitic type can be more powerful, and when the owner dies, the artifact is also destroyed. Those are the two well-known types, but there is another one, the symbiotic type, which is exceptional. They are the artifacts that could revive their dead owners, which must be a resurrection they saw with their own eyes. Balstock believed that no matter how vital an artifact is amid the crumbling dungeons, it's hard to believe that he could have survived that, so he was sure he would be dead. Gerald thought it would be great if that were true, but they had to return to the capital for now. He instructed him to hang up wanted signs for Stetch Atelier in every town they would pass through and to keep it on the low side because if the bounty were too high, it would draw attention. Meanwhile, the main lead wondered what he was supposed to do now and where he was now. He activated his animal insight and looked at the ring, but it refused and energy emitted from the artifact. He wondered how he declined, and the skeleton appeared from the artifact and uttered that he saved him using the passive skill of mending the soul. Furthermore, he has done these things, and now his body suffers from stats down, and he was shocked and wondering what he means by all these. He furiously looked at him and clarified that his meaning was that he had lost some energy because of him. The protagonist wondered what he was and why he could hear his voice in his head, and the artifact uttered his name, Memento Mortem. After some time, the protagonist understood that he meant he was that artifact and inquired if other artifacts have a conscience like him, and it refused. He was glad they could communicate. He soon reached a high mountain and started climbing it. Apart from reviving and regenerating, he inquired what else he could do with that artifact and how many unique skills it could use. Usually, only one unique skill is attached to each tool, but he could exchange them for a reasonable price. Furthermore, if the skill is valuable, it would be worth more. The artifacts uttered that if he usually functions, it would be around 40, which is possible. The protagonist was so shocked that he fell as he couldn't believe it because the number of skills or music humans can acquire by themselves is usually 10. Even if they use an enchantment, the limit is about 20, but with an incredible artifact, the skills that he could use are that many. There were so many, so he inquired if there was a skill that he could use currently. There was one skill that he could use, but the artifact had used up all of its mana to resurrect him, so it wants to talk first as it recovers its mana. He reached up and asked what that was, but before it told him about the skill, the artifact said to him that he had 12 hours left before he died. He was shocked as he thought he wouldn't die now as the artifact resurrected him and inquired what he was talking about. The artifacts uttered that unless it died, he would live, and he wouldn't disappear as long as he was alive, but if the artifact didn't have mana, they would both die. Memento asked if he thought that he could come back to life with no cost, and instructed him to move quickly if he wanted to live. He rushed out and asked why it didn't tell him soon that they would both die if he couldn't have any mana. Memento was different from humans as he didn't stress about life for anything. He was sleeping peacefully, but he came and warned him suddenly. He decided to give him as much strength as he needed since he assumed that he was struggling to live. He reminded him that just because he awakened him didn't mean he would be his owner, so the one begging to leave wasn't the artifact but him. He agreed and understood everything and urged him to tell him how he could help him receive his mana. It had to use curse eating, which is the ability to eat and absorb the source of curses and demons against weak monsters or cursed tools. The protagonist doesn't know about the cursed tool, but knows about the beast, so he inquires if all he has to do is catch some beast. Memento affirmed and reminded him that he had 11 hours and 56 minutes left, which startled him, and he requested that he stop rushing him out. He rushed in search of monsters and was sure many monsters should be near the dungeon. He wanted to activate his animal instinct, but his stat was down, so he had to find them himself. He looked around for the traces, found the footprints, and was sure they might be monsters' footprints. There were also marks nearby, and he could sense a strange stench and was sure it was the stench of a corpse. Soon he was able to find a great wolf that was eating the flesh of a corpse, and he was glad as he saw one monster and asked about the duration till the penalty was effective. He had 1 minute and 30 seconds, which was unexpectedly short. Memento explained that stats down happens when there is no mana, which is a kind of overload. So, the stronger the skill, the higher the penalty. The protagonist is glad because the timing is good. Besides, there is only one. More than one would have been hard to deal with, which is their good luck. He has recovered, which makes him feel better, and he asks Memento whether he has attack skills. Memento had one skill: air bullets that fired air compressed bullets at high speed and increased the attack speed. It's elemental magic that a battle wizard uses, so he wondered how many bullets it could shoot. It could shoot one bullet, and he remembered it too, so he decided to focus. Since it was like this, they had no choice but to aim for the heart or lungs carefully. If they strike either of them accurately, it should pass out, and after that, they could just kill it and recover the mana. So he got ready and instructed the artifact not to shoot until he said because they had just one bullet. Memento smirked at this and found him frustrated. Without waiting for his command, it fired the air bullets that made a giant hole in the monster's body, which shocked him as he called it an air bullet. He was sure it was just elemental magic, so what kind of power was this? Furthermore, he instructed it to shoot it when he was ready, but he didn't listen. Memento said he was not just a magic ornament that used sloppy skills. Furthermore, he thought it was much better to just shoot with Stetch's mouth closed rather than hesitate from being scared. The protagonist thought they shouldn't talk about it and moved his hand toward the monster's corpse, and it activated its skill curse eating. Meanwhile, in the presence of the Venetian royal family, there are 3 princes under King Bodyrus. The first is Rapors, the second is Alfred, and the third is Gerald. Rapors, being the eldest prince, is naturally prioritized to succeed on the throne. As a result, the other 2 princes are trying to prove their superiority in every possible way. He was furious because using the artifact was an excellent way to improve his position, but now he would be viewed as a careless libertine trying to take the kingdom's dungeon. Ballstock wondered what he was thinking about, and he was thinking about that fortune teller guy. He realized he was talking about Prince Alfred Henchman, and he affirmed and presumed that his name was Conrad and cursed him. Gerald believed too much in the information provided by the so-called alliance, although it was confirmed that there was a curse on it. His man understood that they didn't show the most important result, but the prince didn't know yet whether he did it intentionally or not, and there was nothing he could do about it. Ballstock requested the prince not to worry too much about it because he had much experience on the battlefield, so he would handle it just fine. The prince can't believe politics are more complicated than surviving on the battlefield. Even though years have passed, he is still not used to this. Meanwhile, the protagonist's artifact absorbed the energy from the monster's corpse, and they inquired if it would be enough. This was not enough, but it will work for some time as its mana only charges up to 15% of just a single great wolf. Memento wondered if he had a problem with it. Although he didn't have any trouble, he asked if he would run out of skills if he used it thrice. He knew they had been looking for him since he took the artifact, so the problem was where he could settle for now. But first of all, he needed to pick up his belongings before he could enter the dungeon. While hiding behind the tree, he peeked at the village entrance where 2 guards were on duty. He was sure he would get caught if he went in and wondered what he should do. He was stunned as he saw the valerian grass. As this should work for him, he took it, lit a fire, and then maximized the effect with Flemin's powder. Although it's only limited to humans, it becomes an excellent sleeping pill. so he blocked his nostrils and took that near them. The guards were alerted by the sudden appearance of the smoke and looked around to find the source of the smoke. They could sense a weird smell coming from it, and soon they collapsed. Memento was amazed as the protagonist knew how to use his head. He has been wandering here and there and has become an experienced explorer. He was dumbfounded as he saw his wanted posture hanging there, and was amazed as they turned him into the desired person and cursed them. He took off the posture, furiously made a ball, and wanted to teach them a lesson. He knew he was in big trouble and couldn't believe he had become a desired person in one night, as they acted faster than he thought. He wasn't sure how far this had spread, but it would be impossible to live normally in the village if it were like this. For a second, he had second thoughts about giving up on this. As long as he could use this ring properly, he could still manage to a certain degree, as the most straightforward way was to leave the kingdom. It was not his style to go so obediently and furiously grasp that posture. Memento asked him if he wanted revenge. He was sure anyone would unless a person was a snowflake. The artifact laughed as now it was becoming a little more fun and agreed to help him if that's the reason. He reminded him that he was fortunate because he was invincible as long as he was helping him. The protagonist wondered what nonsense his artifact was spouting when he could only use 4 skills. He uttered that curse eating is the ability to get rid of endless curses and sources of evil, and inquired if he thinks he has this ability for no reason. Its power and ability depend on how much mana he can absorb, so he should feel tiny about what that means. Depending on how much he absorbs, he could grow and become stronger. If he absorbs something with much mana, he will become much more substantial. The protagonist inquired if he could drink the artifact, and Memento said he could lend strength. He should help him gather the artifacts. Then his revenge will be taken together with him, as Gerald would take just one blow. The protagonist enthusiastically asks if that's real, and if he did what he told him to, he could destroy Gerald with his own hands. It affirmed and decided to make him feel what it's like to trample on the enemy from above. Meanwhile, at the bar, the man asked Dalton if fine leather was being sold anywhere, but the price should be affordable. He thought for a while and replied that there should be some on the black market. He cursed those people who tried to sell it to him at an exaggerated price, even though the average was around 500 crowns. Dalton asked if he wanted to introduce him to a refined explorer, and was startled as he saw the new wanted list. The man informed him that there were a couple of new ones he could hang on the wall or something, but he was shocked as he saw Stetch's picture and wondered what he was up to. The man showed the guard a permit plaque, and the guard instructed him not to lose it as he had to show him this wooden plaque whenever he made a deal. If he lost it, some of his luggage could be confiscated and searched when he left, and he thanked him for his hard work. The protagonist was looking at them, and he knew that in a ton like that, there is always a back door as great stuff comes into the black market. It wondered why he could want to go into town, as he thought he would be going straight to the dungeon when he heard him. He supposed he might be stupid as he didn't know that using the escape scroll is essential when getting into the dungeon. He wouldn't be crushed if he went bare-handed there. Memento wondered if that was the scroll they used before leaving the dungeon to escape. The protagonist affirmed and explained that it's convenient that there are many supplies, but there is a risk of abuse, so the deal is under control. They wondered what he would do to get it, but he assured them not to worry as he found the back door. He knocked at the door and uttered that the fish that goblins eat was a freshwater perch. The person from inside was amazed as that was code from 3 months ago. The person inquired who he was, and he apologized to Dalton as there wasn't much to come there for, and he recognized that he was Stetch. Dalton happily hugged him so tightly that he couldn't breathe, as it had been so long since they last met. He instructed him to memorize the codes because of what he would do if he weren't the one watching him. Thanks to him, the protagonist was pleased as he survived, and it was so urgent that he couldn't even think of any other way. Dalton was fine with this, as he knew Stetch always went through the front door only because the back door didn't look good, and he was glad to meet him. He took him inside the market and offered him a welcome drink, but he decided to have the drink later and asked for permission to use a seat. He remembered wanting a badge and asked what it was and who he had stolen from. He retrieved all of the items from his tiny bag and was amazed as the rumors spread fast, and explained that he got involved somehow, but that wasn't a deal. He displayed his items, which included the energy-enhancing claw from the great wolf and high-quality leather, and suggested that people get them before the stocks run out. Everyone gathered near his items, looking at them. He inquired Dalton about the scroll price, which was 600 crowns if he got it from there. He decided to borrow some money from him, knowing that if he kept selling things like this, it would take him a year to buy the stuff he needed. Dalton refused, so he made a crying face, and he agreed and asked how much money he wanted. He needed at least enough money to buy 4 scrolls and promised to pay him back in 2 days. There was nothing that he couldn't lend him, but he wanted to listen to what the protagonist had to say first and what he stole that put him in his current position. He assumed that if it was around 400 crowns, he could pay it and release the wanted notice. The protagonist smirked and remarked that the immature son of the provincial lord behaves in a mean way, so he tried teaching the lesson, but even if it's the case, he thinks he could give up his pride easily. Dalton made fun of him as it doesn't seem wise to build his self-esteem on just that much money. He told him about the guy who knew about scroll to get it cheaply and asked if he needed anything else. If he wants to get a new set of equipment, he could ask Clyde, referring to the guy sleeping behind, and put the payment under his name. The protagonist went to that guy, requesting Dalton to get him something to eat, and slams the table to wake him up. He was the same old guy that he had seen at the entrance. He was furious at him as he wanted to fight with him by disturbing his sleep. The protagonist was in his defense mode and inquired him what had happened to him as he had been drunk in broad daylight. He was sad because even if he sell everything at a bargain price, it doesn't get sold, and he assumed it might be because he got much stuff that hasn't been verified. The protagonist looked at the tool, and after listening to his story, he wanted to suggest something and asked for his opinion of all the weapons on which one he was the most confident. He was shocked and looked at him as if he was going to buy his item, but Stetch clarified that he wouldn't buy it if it were expensive. Since he was buying, he showed him a cheap gun and wanted him to think as if he was making him do a test run for him. The protagonist uttered that he is going to need a weapon that will be useful when he enters the dungeon, so he wants him to pick one for him. Clyde informed him that weapons could only be effective by using the weapons that fit the user because he is physically fit and has some muscles. He showed him a giant hammer and asked for his opinion. Memento remarked that it was ridiculous as he thought he could swing it properly in a dungeon where most of the passageways are narrow. He agreed to what he said and was shocked soon, and he urged him not to come out randomly without his permission. Memento wants him not to make a fuss because he can only feel his presence. He remarked that this dwarf doesn't seem to have magical abilities, but the weapons are incredible. Since he talked so much, the protagonist assumed he might know how to use these tools. Memento clarified that he is an artifact, unlike humans. He was familiar with it and could feel its structure. If he had to choose one of them, he would rather have the sword on the right, and he grabbed it, wondering if it would be helpful. Memento assured him that as long as he could use it properly, he would not even bother to look at those weapons. No matter how hard he looked at them, this didn't look normal to him. Later, he was in the dungeon wondering why there were so many monsters. Even after killing them, he could see many others ready to attack. He lifted his hand, pointing toward them, and commanded his artifact to shoot. After they were dead, he activated his cursed eating skill and absorbed the mana. The protagonist guessed the excess energy was used for this artifact's growth. He went inside and decided to collect all of the azure stones that he found there. He started gathering them and was amazed at the thought that he would be able to get them all. Later, he found a trap, wondering why it was always there at each step. He decided to use the valuable parts, but before he could take them, he heard a strange sound. He pointed his ring in that direction, requesting Memento to light it up there, and was shocked as the mineral lizard appeared before him. With this many minerals around, it would be weird if no mineral lizard protected it. The mineral lizard inhaled strongly, which shocked him. It threw acid at him and injured him. Memento tried to put some sense in him and instructed him to be alert. Just because he could revive doesn't mean he should get injured whenever he wants. It activated the skill recovery, which automatically recovers stamina and injuries, and cursed him as he met an annoying pest as a partner. The protagonist was aware that mineral lizards use their acidic breath to eat through minerals and strengthen their body using those minerals. So a normal attack wouldn't even leave a scratch on them. Then there was only one thing left that he could do, and he directed his hand toward the lizard. Memento stopped him because they were too deep into the dungeon, so using the air bullet in an enclosed spa like this could cause it to collapse. The mineral lizard was ready to attack him, but he tried to dodge it and stop the thought of using the air bullets. The artifacts praised him, and he wondered what was good about them. Then it explained that it was an excellent opportunity to try out Clyde's weapon. He was amazed as he thought it was the right time for this experiment, but it still asked him if he was sure about this. His partner wondered why he was asking this and if he wanted to save it until they fought the dungeon keeper. Instead of the dungeon keeper, a solid mid-sized monster is their perfect test subject. It didn't sound like he had a choice, so he took out his sword, inserted a chemical tube, and was ready to attack it. As the mineral lizard jumped at him to attack, he struck him with his sword. The monster stepped back, but before it could take action, it saw him above his head, attacking him. The protagonist attacked it, but it didn't cause any damage, and the lizard surrounded him with its hand. Memento instructed him to press the trigger. As he pressed the button, it pierced the monster's head and killed it. The protagonist jumped. He was holding his shoulder as it got a bit injured and wondered why it didn't shatter its head as it was supposed to do. Memento activated curse eating and the protagonist sighed. Although he got it for free, it still seemed like such a waste because the gas he inserted in it was rare, and he had just 4 left. It seemed like Clyde made them durable, and they wondered what would happen if they broke. The artifact felt something wrong, and he asked what the problem was. He couldn't pinpoint it, but he still felt like something was off. The protagonist wonders how he is supposed to understand him. Memento wonders if that's the lizard meat and warns him not to let his guard down and to be careful. He heard the growling sound and assumed it was producing it, but he was shocked as another mineral lizard appeared. He took out his sword and filled it with the gas tube, but didn't want to waste all of his cylinders that early because he had to save some for the dungeon keeper. The mineral lizard attacked him, but before it could be successful, he evaded the attack and saw an opening in its neck. He was shooting at its opening, but was stopped as the lizard attacked him with his tail, and he realized that this one was more experienced than the previous one. Especially with its tail, it was getting in his way, but still, compared to the Tarsk from the last dungeon, he was nothing but a lizard. He rushed to attack him, but it blocked the attack with his arms and surprised him as his one was much sturdier. It threw him back with his tail, and Memento cursed him as he told him to be careful because there was something strange about him. He agreed because he could also know he was strong, but it might have weaknesses as long as he was a loving organism. He was stunned as suddenly he saw the lizard's claw attacking him, which grabbed his face substantially. Memento called and scolded him because even the baby goblin doesn't space out in the middle of a battle, so he should pay attention. The protagonist thought he was being a little too harsh. This was a part of his plan. He asked if he knew what happened when the flamenco powder in his left hand and the firefly powder in his other hand combined. He combined them, and a flash appeared that obstructed the vision. Taking advantage of this situation, he attacked it with his sword. He was glad because his plan worked, and his sword was close to its mouth, so he just had to stab him in the mouth, and then he would win. Memento received a warning message as irregular cell activity was detected, and 95% of the body was affected. He was stopping, but he didn't hear, and there was a massive explosion. He was lying injured, and Memento was recovering his body and got furious at him for not listening to him as he was stopping him. The protagonist gets frustrated too, as he should told him this before he went in. He looked at the exploded area and wondered what happened. He explained that the mineral lizard's body was magically modified, meaning someone in the dungeon changed the monster's body. He wasn't sure how exactly they did it. The protagonist was shocked and inquired if he meant that every monster that he fought from now on could explode. He wasn't sure about it as there was some chance, and he asked him if he was scared, but he refused. He wasn't afraid and was still going in. He put his hand on the ground and activated his path-finding skills, but was shocked as he couldn't detect anything even though he was using animal instinct. He was startled as he saw a skeleton on his way and wondered if it was a monster or just a skeleton. But his partner warned him that it was a monster, which usually didn't react unless they got close to it. It seemed like he had been there for a while as he was petrified entirely and warned him that this might explode if he touched it, so it would be best to ignore it. He passed the petrified monster and looked around, but was alarmed as he could hear the crackling sounds and looked behind. He wondered what was happening as some modification in the beast was visible, and Memento instructed him to run. Suddenly, the monster exploded, and he was thrown down. While getting up, he cursed them and wondered what he was supposed to do if they burst, even when he didn't touch them. The artifacts get furious at him and want him to stop talking for 1 second, but he is amazed to see so many unique minerals that he could probably live off of them for the rest of his life. He tried to grab one of the minerals, but sparks appeared from it, so he pulled his hand back. Memento comprehended what's been bothering him this whole time and was sure Stetch might not feel, but strange mana was filling this dungeon. The concentration of this strange mana is getting stronger and stronger the deeper they go, which is even starting to annoy him. The mineral lizard, the skeleton, and the father in the dungeon went to find these monsters, the more sensitive and explosive they were. From what he explained, the protagonist understood that their bodies might have become unstable because of this strange mana. Memento affirmed, and looking at that reaction, he assumed that it was not just monsters being affected. He thought every object in that dungeon was being influenced. From the object, he means that this tunnel, which was full of minerals, has become a minefield. He had extra bad news for him, and Stetch wondered what else could go wrong now. The other bad news was that even low-level recovery spells were blocked because of the high mana concentration. He was surprised as he didn't notice it and looked at his hands that were still injured. This was just his guess, but in a situation like this, his escape scroll wouldn't work there either. That mana concentration would interfere with the scroll's ability to find a safe location, and the worst scenario is that he could be teleported into a pile of rocks. He gets worried because he can't escape, but this isn't impossible as he isn't sure who it is. If he defeats the thing that's emitting this mana, he could be able to escape again. That still means that he must keep moving forward, and he guessed he should be glad because it's not impossible. After searching for a while, he couldn't find the source that was emitting all that mana, yet he found a door, and he assumed that the thing that was probably behind these doors could be the cause. There was no use in worrying about it now, and he opened the door and found a strange thing inside. He was shocked and wondered what that giant thing was. Memento explained that it was a djinn, which increased his worry, and he asked why a spirit would be there. He pointed at the center of that thing, which seemed like something was off, and soon recognized it as an artifact. Spirits are formed when mana and negative energy collide. They exist only to destroy their surroundings and have no consciousness. They are closer to a natural disaster than a life form, and there's an artifact at the center of that spirit. The protagonist was stunned to see it, and Jin attacked him. Memento realized that the keeper was the problem. It is fused with the artifact and has been spreading its mana throughout the dungeon, so everything became a live bomb. The protagonist assumes that the simple answer to this problem is that he has to beat it up before he leaves. As he thought of attacking it, it attracted many stones and threw them toward the protagonist, so he rushed away and tried to get rid of them with his sword. He was shocked as they appeared again and soon exploded and injured him. Memento instructed him to be careful. This was the part of the dungeon with the highest concentration of mana, and his interference made it even more potent. At that rate, he was worried that everything, including his sword and body, would explode. The protagonist gets furious, as he should have told him about this sooner, and the monster steps forward to attack him. The protagonist was dumbfounded as that was too much. It shot the exploding stones at him again. He stood still, worried about what to do, but his partner instructed him to run if he wanted to survive. The djinn attacked him, and he hid behind the stone and evaded the attack. After the monster was done, he knew that it was now or never situation, so he rushed to attack him. He was aware that even if its entire body were just one giant boulder, its joint would be probably its weak points, so he shot its joint. He was shocked as one stone separated from it, and it stopped midway through, attacked the protagonist, threw him away, and rushed back toward the monster. This didn't work, so he wondered how he was supposed to deal with it and damage the monster's body. Memento instructed him to aim for the artifact at its core. Currently, its core and the artifact are fused, so if he used curse eating on its core, it would lose all its power. This was easier said than done, and he was trying to avoid close combat with it as much as possible, so he had only one thing left to do. He lifted his hand and pointed toward its core to use the air bullet, which was his last hope, but soon the monster attacked him, and he was pushed back. He wondered if it would pierce through. It was too strong to dodge, and he fell back. After this, it attacked him numerous times, which he evaded, but soon he was shocked to see a massive stone on his head, which he hardly managed to dodge. He wondered if long-range attacks and other attacks, neither of them worked. Then he tried to attack him closely and wondered how it would block his thus attack. The monster was protecting its core with his hand. He found him attacking it so that he couldn't stab it into the core. But a burst would work at this range, so he activated the sword, but it didn't work much and was thrown away again. He was severely injured and was holding his head and inquired if their last air bullet didn't work at it. He thought it would be enough to smash some rocks, but his artifact already informed him that magic skills wouldn't work correctly because of the mana interference. He was chatting with him when he abruptly saw many of those explosive stones above his head, which he blocked with his sword. Soon there was an explosion. Memento wondered if he was okay, but the main lead asked if it looked fine as he felt like he was trying to break a rock with an egg. He alerted him to look to his left as he was being attacked from that side, but he thought that if he couldn't overcome a small challenge like this, he wouldn't even deserve revenge. He rushed away and was sure he could do it, but Clyde's weapon could get a hit even if his attacks had been ineffective until now. If he kept targeting its core, he could chip away at its defense, which could be difficult but not impossible. He was startled as he suddenly saw its hand approaching him. He attacked him using his sword and was worried because he had just one more cylinder left. So if he couldn't land his one last attack properly, he would be done for this. He had to target the same spot again. He saw it gathering many stones around its core and wondered what it was up to now. He was stunned as it tried to spin with that giant body. Memento wondered what he was standing there for and instructed him to escape. But he stood there, shocked, and activated his animal instinct. Soon, it attacked him and fell back. His artifacts wondered if he was all right. Although it wasn't the best time to say this, he figured out that his body was reacting to the mana too, because it was mutating. The protagonist sighed and asked if he knew how long it would take until his body fully mutated. Memento uttered that it would take 3 minutes maximum, and it could be 1 minute, depending on his condition. He was furious and remarked that it would be enough for him to get one last hit in. If his body and weapons were about to break down by his next attack, then 1 or 2 minutes are plenty of time. He gazed at its core and rushed there. His artifact wondered what he was doing and if he was planning on killing himself. He reached near its core, and it started spinning again. He uttered that he didn't plan on dying. He moved his hand toward it and attacked it using the air bullet. Then he went above his head and was sure that no matter how fast it spun, he was just a sitting duck. When it is an attack from above, and when it stops rotating to guard its core, it is the right time to attack. He attacked the same spot again and was pleased as his sword penetrated about a half or more this time, which should be enough for him to activate. He burst. He triggered the burst, but was worried as he failed again and couldn't defeat it. Memento alerted him and instructed him to move away if he didn't want to die because it was approaching him. Stetch was worried as he went through so much because he could feasibly solo his dungeon and wondered if he would die there. He refused to believe such kind of bullshit and wanted to attack it one more time, so he retrieved his azure stone from the bag and slammed it while cursing him. He defeated the dungeon keeper and was lying on the ground injured and looked at its core, which he finally managed to broke. He lifted his hand toward the monster so that Memento could initiate the curse eating, after which he untied his scroll and escaped from the dungeon. After some time, he was outside the dungeon, lying on the ground with his broken sword and gaining consciousness. His body was feeling much better after the recovery, and his wounds were also healed, and mutation disappeared from his body. He checked his overall condition. His limbs were intact, but his clothes were not in the best shape. He thought he should also check his status while inspecting other things. His animal instinct level was upgraded to level 7. It now maximizes sense in one's extremities and enhances hearing about utilizing echolocation and curse-eating skills, upgraded to level 4. He was stunned as his abilities upgraded. Although he wasn't sure about the curse-eating skill, he thought it impossible to level up animal instinct further than he had already reached. He was surprisingly staring at Memento because it was time to say something, but he was quiet and asked if he was okay and sleeping. He gets scared by the sudden disruption in the status board and wonders what is happening. Many notifications appeared simultaneously, informing him that the artifact Memento Mortem's mana limit had been increased from 100 to 150. The active skill Air Bullet was also evolved to Air Burst. 2 new skills have been added, which include Crosswind. He wondered if it absorbed some of the skills from the artifact, as there were so many pop-ups on his status board. It was currently in the process of unlocking the artifact's hidden talent, and all of its skills would be unlocked after a particular requirement had been met. The number of artifacts absorbed by Memento was 1, and the currently stored mana was 8305. The list of multiple locked skills appeared, which included Curse Aura, Curse Devourer, Synchro, Caesar, and Avatar, which have different mana requirements. The protagonist doesn't know those skills and is sure that the Memento would have explained it to him if he was awake, and assumed that he wouldn't return until the upgrade process finished. He wasn't sure if all the artifacts were like this, but it's pretty cool that it could use absorbed artifacts and mana to upgrade itself. According to his current mana storage, he could choose from just 2 skills, Curse Aura or Curse Devourer. He didn't like how those sounded, but he had to choose one, and soon he selected one of the abilities that was unlocked for him to use. Later, he went to Clyde's shop and called him. Clyde was surprised, wondering what was wrong with him. He felt like he hadn't seen him for a long time and asked if something was wrong. He wanted to request him as he wanted him to repair and modify his weapon and show him his broken weapon. Clyde was speechless on seeing his weapon broken. Stetch explained that he didn't do it on purpose, as this weapon saved his life several times, and thanked him for this sword. Clyde was crying and promised him that he would fix this up and promised to make it stronger and more durable this time. The protagonist takes a peaceful breath because he insists he promised to give him his full support. He handed him his loot from the dungeons, some monster drops and old trap parts, and his deposit, around 3,000 crowns. Clyde was shocked to see this much money, and the protagonist demanded some extra cylinders before leaving and expressed his gratitude in advance. Later, he went to Dalton's bar. Dalton was glad to see him, although he was late this time. The protagonist was amazed that he wasn't angry at him for breaking his main dungeon, and he guessed the mine he told him about worked out pretty well. He laughed and informed him that bids from the black market were already pouring in and wondered if he was interested. He refused as he wasn't interested and was going upstairs to come to Shut-Eye. Dalton laughed and instructed him to tell him if he needed anything. After he left, Dalton was amazed. He couldn't believe he had destroyed that dungeon alone. Meanwhile, inside his room, he lay on the bed and told Memento to come out as it was already too long that he was sleeping. It appeared and felt so lightheaded. The protagonist was amazed that Memento would know anything until he activated his ability. He affirmed it because when he met him, he got reset, and most of his abilities and skills were sealed then. There was one thing that he realized last night, which is that the Air Bullet was a basic spell without an evolution tree, yet his skill changed. It took a new form as it evolved, in air bursts, which means he skillfully focused on his needs. But this was a long-winded explanation, for he does not know anything about his future skills and abilities either, and it doesn't seem like evolution as it looks different. Memento furiously uttered "Ha, still, he would know how to use it once he unlocked the skill. It is hard to explain it, but it is like he suddenly remembered things from long ago." The protagonist asked him what the cursed aura does, but his artifact decided to tell him the next time they were in a dungeon because he would probably forget even if he told him now. He wondered when he planned to head up, but he had to get his weapon back from Clyde and wanted to sleep. Late at night, Dalton knocked on the door while asleep, disrupting his sleep. He woke up and was worried when Dalton called him. He had terrible news for him and wondered what happened. When he opened the door, he saw him out of breath and told him about Clyde. On hearing that something had happened to him, he rushed out and asked where he was. He was shocked as he saw Clyde's lying there and was severely injured and wondered what had happened to him. He asked for a second explanation and asked Ash if he had brought what he had told him, and Ash affirmed. He explained that one of his customers found him in an alleyway and brought him there. Dalton opened the bottle of strange liquor and was pouring it on Clyde's, which alarmed Stetch, and he furiously tried to stop him. wondering what he was doing with an injured person. After he poured the liquid on his face, all of the injuries and wounds were recovered, and Stetch was amazed to see how the poon was effective and asked for his prices. Although it wasn't cheap, Dalton knew it was the right time to use it, and he wouldn't have another chance. Hay was staring at him, and soon, he woke up and wondered where he was. The protagonist inquired who had done this to him. He wasn't exactly sure, but those assaulters were probably related to Derek's gang. He thought that one of the people who jumped him was a part of his gang. Everyone was furious on hearing as this gang attacked him again, and it was like a pain in their neck. The protagonist wondered who Derek was. Dalton said those were idiots and a nuisance. They left him alone because he was not causing them any significant issues, but once he taught him a lesson because he was causing trouble for some travelers. He was probably targeting Clyde because of that. But there was another thing as Clyde heard them talking about Stek when they took his money. One of them said his money wouldn't satisfy them until he reported his friend with a bounty and put him in jail, and he wanted him to be careful. The protagonist was shocked, but told him not to worry as he would deal with it on his end, so he should focus on fixing his sword and ask him if he needs more money. Clyde's refused as he didn't need more money because he was returning from ordering the required parts. While leaving, the protagonist instructs Dalton to have someone guard Clyde's workshop just in case something happens again. He was going out for a second, so he borrowed his cape for some time because he had something to deal with. On his way, Memento asked if he was nervous, and he was pretty nervous because it had been a while since he beat people up guilt-free. His artifact wondered if he was going to kill them, but he wasn't going to go around killing everyone who pissed him off. The protagonist was calmer than he expected, but he was sure they would not get off easy either. His situation was quite fun for Memento, and he activated his animal instinct to race the path. Meanwhile, at the town entrance, he assures the guards that he saw him, but they don't believe him and get furious. They apologize to Derek as Dalton was a